You are listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
We are ready with our first guest today, and of course I want to welcome our good friend Dan Kish, who is the Senior Vice President with the Institute for Energy Research, back to the Final Say Radio Show. Dan, it's always a pleasure to have you on the program. Welcome back.
Well, thanks, Brett. Great to be back.
Well, this is incredible. As I've been looking through what, another one of these just absolutely long-winded, too-many-page reports, there are some very interesting things. Another one that you were just pointing out to me. But in my opinion, I would just sum this up as they're creating something so you have a smoking gun so you can respond and create policy. Of course, they're creating, in my opinion, of course, and you may agree or disagree, they're creating the fire so they could put it out, and while they're doing it, they're also coming up with methodologies and things that can't possibly be solutions because there are impossibilities. So essentially they're able to set up a methodology in a way to stymie or absolutely destroy certain areas of our energy sector. And of course, on this program, we say all of the above, and of course, we're not necessarily, rooting for anything other than just free market. Let people decide what sources of energy they want to use, and that's a good thing.
This is it's an amazing report. What it really is, Brett, is I'll give you John Podesta's own words yesterday. He called it a voter education, an attempt to spur better voter education. Those are his words. And it has a natural public education effect, so that people will, quote, support the solutions to climate change. And I think this report can influence that. Again, a quote from him. Through that education, the public is, quote, going to be prepared to take more action. Well, what's that sound like? That doesn't sound like a government report based on science or anything, and it can't be, because in essence, they rejected the science that even the UN and the IPCC report a couple of months ago came out with, certainly on weather, because in that, this report suggests that intensity of extreme weather events are increasing, when in reality, the climatic data center of this government says there is no extreme weather increase, no significant trends in floods, droughts, hurricanes, or tornadoes, and so ultimately you've got a situation where they're basically just telling us to accept things that contradict their own previous reports that they've put out and official government things that are happening, and we're supposed to just buy it and accept the noose around our neck.
Now, two quick things, Dan. The first is, I'm looking at the report, and they have a map here of observed U.S. temperature change, and they're showing, of course, 1 to 1.5 degrees and greater than, or 1.5 degrees, are these bright red colors, and most of the map, or at least half of the map, falls into that categories. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we haven't had these temperature increases as they're suggesting, and especially when you look at the entire globe, the Earth is barely warmed. And then additionally, I'd add to that, and this isn't necessarily your area of expertise, but I know you've read quite a bit about this, but in the grand scheme of history, looking at hundreds of years of recorded weather history and climate history, that this is fairly normal, anything that we're observing, including the weather patterns.
Well, of course. I mean, we've got these things that are called seasons in the northern hemisphere, and in the southern hemisphere they have them too. They're really, in the winter it's cold, and then in the summer it's a lot warmer, and in the spring it's getting warmer, and in the fall it's getting colder. And at night when the sun goes down, it gets colder generally because we don't have that solar activity, which, of course, these people discount entirely, as though the sun doesn't have anything to do with our temperature, and every day we go to bed, all we have to do is look at that. They ascribe all of this climate impact simply on carbon dioxide and things that you and I and all your listeners do, when in reality we could every day we watch the sun go up and down. And if we followed their logic every morning at about 6 o'clock when I get up, I'd be worrying because the temperature is going up, and if it keeps doing that by next week, we're going to be boiling. But it doesn't happen that way, and it hasn't happened that since the beginning of time, certainly on Earth. And therein lies the flaws in this. I mean, you're right. They show a map of the United States, and we're somehow supposed to believe that this is a global warming issue, when in reality, the global temperature records do not show this at all. And for the past 17 years and 3 months, they've not adhered to their own computer models that the UN and IPCC has said, and they actually admit that. The White House didn't. This is a political document. It's a PR document. It is contrived exclusively to convince people, and as a public and, to quote Podesta, voter education project, to get people to accept the fact that they want to drive up the price of your energy, tell you how to live, tell you what kind of car to drive, and basically centralize more power in Washington while picking your pocket for more money. That's what it is. And I hate to sound so harsh, but I can conclude nothing but based on the massive holes that they've got in this report.
Well,
right.
Dan, beyond just that, is it not also based on their own words? I mean, everything that Obama had stated prior to becoming president, I mean, he made it very clear. And when we can play the tongue-in-cheek game and say we need to get rid of clouds because clouds, clearly we can feel them as they pass over and come. Clouds also create immediate and harsh climate change. But let's take a look at past science, right? Because we have been literally if we even question anything about global warming or now climate change, we are radical crazies. And I just want to point out, and you're probably aware of this, 4 years ago when the Nixon libraries released another huge wave of documents, there were some interesting releases about Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who most people, certainly you're well aware of, was a major leading Democrat. And Patrick Moynihan had said, and these are his words because he was trying to convince Nixon that we had to do something to stop carbon dioxide spread. This was in 1969. Now, here's what he said. This could increase the average temperature near the Earth's surface by 7 degrees Fahrenheit. This, in turn, could raise the level of sea by 10 feet. Goodbye, New York. Goodbye, Washington. Now, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but are you not standing in Washington right now? And please let me know and let our fans know, is Washington above or below the waterline? Was Daniel Patrick Moynihan correct, or was he yet another fearmonger who decades have proven he was completely inaccurate?
Well, I'm on the 9th floor, John, so I'm kind of spared that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, all of these crazy predictions. President's science advisor, John Holdren, is famous for crazy predictions and suggestions on these sorts of things because they come from the school of and I don't think Moynihan necessarily was one of those. I think he was a fairly thoughtful guy. But just the fact that the president's science advisor, John Holdren, has discussed in the past ways to limit population, including looking at whether or not sterilants ought to be put in the water in order to control population, because obviously if we have more population, this is from the 1970s as well, so the type of science, the type of approach, the type of outlook that these people have on life is I think foreign to most Americans. You wouldn't know that by reading the media because, of course, they just say he's a scientist from Stanford. What they don't say is that the person directly whispering into the president's ear on all matters science and who led along with John Podesta, the rollout of this yesterday, has a record of bizarre statements about humans and the environment that have all been proven wrong over decades of experience. So he's got a longer record of being wrong than we've even been measuring carbon dioxide for purposes of determining its impact on human activity.
That's a good point. Dan, one last question. I know we're running up on a time with you, so I'll ask this, what I think is really the most important aspect of where they're going with this. Clearly, they're trying to get cap and trade any which way they can. Clearly, they're trying to control more of what we do in more of our lives through energy policy now. And here's the question, though. Even if their claims were correct, and even if the United States were to make drastic changes and basically just go back to the bicycle, I suppose, and candles, or, I guess we can't even use candles because that goes into the air too. But whatever would be compliant to what they're looking for, isn't the fact that, nearly half the world's or near, close enough to half the world's population live in China and India, and they are not going to sign on to any of this, type of policy, then anything we do is doing nothing more than losing American jobs, harming the American economy, and making us unable to compete in the world arena?
Oh, of course. That's the bizarre thing about this. If you took the United States contribution of carbon dioxide out of the equation, within a decade, it would be as though the United States never existed in terms of the replacement carbon dioxide by other nations. And that, by the way, doesn't include any acceleration of industrial activity by those nations at all. Basically, on the increase by those other nations would bury the excising the United States' contributions to carbon dioxide in the world carbon market. So, it truly makes no sense and is increasingly, which is why they continue to get more frenetic about trying to convince us to allow them to just go ahead and do whatever they please, which just happens to coincide with more money and more power for Washington, D.C. There seems to be a general theme here on all matters, not just in energy, on everything else.
You hit the nail on the head. Anyway, Dan Kish, who's the Senior Vice President with the Institute for Energy Research, thank you so much for joining us, and of course we'll have you back soon. Folks, if you go to instituteforenergyresearch.org, you can find out more about them, and of course right on the top is a recent post by Dan Kish, More Scare Tactics from the White House. And of course there's a link there, thank you so much for that, Dan, to the Climate Assessment Report. So if you want to read it, God bless you.
Yeah, good luck. Thanks, guys.
Take care, Dan.
See you now. Bye-bye.
Take care.